Yo, what up? Gabriel here. A little late on this, but I figured before it was too far gone from my mind, it was worth doing a little bit of a retrospective on the 200 shard series. And what I have here is we're looking at the time range of these 200 shard runs from all the way back to episode 1. That's episode 1 of the first part of the series, which I did allow myself one reload, I believe, for that portion, and then eventually it transitioned into no reload. But I wanted to just combine them. I don't think it was worth sussing those out like separately. Plus, I'm already gonna have not necessarily a whole lot of data to go off of anyway, and any way to just get more data in there is good, I think. So yeah, I'll kind of give my general thoughts on the main differences that I noticed between 200 shards to like just normal runs, which, you know, could always be anywhere from 100 to 200 shards or more, depending on what the run allowed you to do. But anyway, we'll look at the data first. So Winrate by primary clan. Lowest is Umbra, so it would be either Penumbra or Primordium. We'll look later if anything in particular there is lower. I'm pretty sure I'll see Penumbra accounting for most of those losses. Honestly, even without looking at the data, my general thoughts were that there was significantly the runs that always worried me were going to be Sentient, Tethys, and Penumbra runs. There's by far to me the three weakest, especially at 200 shards. I do think 200 shards really exposes the weaknesses of a lot of the lackluster champs and really shoves them toward being pretty useless. But it is worth noting that Stygian, I did just bash Tethys there, but I actually never lost a Tethys run, if you look at this. As a primary Stygian, either Soulguard or Tethys, I never lost a run. Same with the Wormkin champs. So that's pretty wild. The problem there is, like I said, there's only so many runs I play, and I just, in my mind, took note that whenever I got to Tethys, I never really had a bad Tethys run. Whereas, I would have been pretty exposed had that not been the case, especially since Tethys literally can't do anything early game, so if I'm forced to take early shards, it would have been bad. So that's more of a theory thing, but in practice it actually turns out that I never lost a Stygian primary run. Or Wormkin, and then Awoken actually was the next highest at 92%. Hellhorned, my favorite clan, still the clan that I think is the most powerful, but I will say that their champs did not show up at all in the 200 Shard series, especially my former favorite hero. I don't think Shardtail Queen had a good run in the whole series. Her wins were usually in spite of her. I still think she did alright in the early game, which is still more than I can say for something like Tethys, but I don't know. She certainly just... a lot of this is variance, but she just didn't really do much on her runs, and a lot of these losses... I actually wouldn't be surprised if I lost more with Shardtail Queen versus... whatever you call him, Hornbreaker Prince. And then Melting Remnant is the next. I know for a fact a lot of those were those stupid Icarus, or not Icarus, but little Fade runs that I lost. Also, unfortunately, I still haven't fixed the bug. I probably never will with Little Icarus. The way the data is stored on the back end is really stupid for Little Icarus. I'm not sure if any people here work with data or programming or whatnot, but basically, long story short, all of this run data is in JSON files, and they're all pretty large as far as JSON blob goes, and I can parse all of them just fine except for ones that contain Little Icarus, because Little Icarus, the way they implement it is every single time you gain spikes, it's a separate upgrade. So the JSON files are just gigantic, and it just crashes my parser. I could fix it by truncating it manually, but it's just neither here nor there. And then Umbra's, yeah, again, lowest for the primary. As for secondary, Awoken is actually the lowest here by a pretty good margin. We'll know later on if it's Restores or Root Seeds, but I would have to guess that Restores account for most of this, because Root Seeds to me are a very powerful secondary, but Restores are actually pretty shitty as a secondary, especially depending. You know, like Penumbra Restores, horrible. I would argue Tethys Restores is horrible too. Tethys Restores is prone to some of the worst early game like low rolls in existence. But obviously that wasn't a problem here. Then Wormkin, God, I didn't lose a freaking Wormkin game in the whole thing, it looks like. I didn't even realize that. So primary or secondary, no Wormkin losses. I'll have to double check that, make sure nothing got thrown out there, but I will say off the top of my head, I guess I can't remember losing any Wormkin games. Shit, maybe they're the best clan in the game, I don't know. Umbra secondary, pretty good here. I've always said they're a great supporting clan. They just suck as your main clan. Or at least using them as your main stuff or whatever. And then Stygian didn't do too well in the secondary. I mean, I will say I don't think Frozen Lance secondary is very good. It's the hardest to actually get an incant deck together with, and similar to like Dreg's secondary, I think it's just you get these starter cards that really don't do anything for you. And on top of that, they don't do anything to actually support the clan's game plan, in my opinion. All that being said, if there was any Dreg secondary, I won them, because secondary Melting Remnant is 100% win rate. Then blended clan, this is where I just blend everything together. Wormkin at 100. Poor Awoken at the lowest. This is why I kind of lumped that. Remember like a few videos ago, I kind of made a comment that to me, the way I rate the clans is I like Hellhorn the best, I like Wormkin the second best, and all of the others are just equal to me. Like, as good as the Awoken banners are, like, the rest of their shit just kind of sucks. Like, Root Seeds is a good starter. Wildenton is debatably a good hero. I still don't know what to think on that, but I don't think Sentient is a good hero. There still are some bad Awoken here, like, banner units too. I mean, if you don't hit on the big three, you may have a pretty rough run. And I think just the Awoken spells suck. Especially at the uncommon and rare tiers. But yeah, Umbra's second worst, not necessarily surprising. Stygian seems to have a slight edge on Melting and Hellhorned. And blended, if I separate it out by exiled and non-exiled, we definitely see what I kind of suspected here, which is, you know, Restore variant of Awoken at 75% win rate versus the Root Seeds variant at 91%. 91.666, 667 even. Pretty big gap there. Pretty big gap. Now keep in mind that'll also include the, since this is blended, that includes either Root Seeds as your primary or secondary, so there could also be champ difference here, which I would say is definitely present. Like 100% Wildenton's a better champ than Sentient, but we'll actually be able to see that later. I further, you know, break it down. But just interesting here, just to see when I blend it by exiled and non-exiled, the big difference is, like, usually the exiled variant is performing better, like the Hellhorn. It's not a, well, it's a big difference still. It's like an 8% win rate. Exile's better. A Melting Remnant doesn't make any sense to me, but I guess that's how it happened. The Dreg variant, 100% win rate. The from Mold variant, 83%. That's a lot of little Fade, though. I just didn't have very good little Fade games. Then Stygian, well, we know that this is Lance secondary because we know that Tethys primary never lost, so it's all to blame. But this is interesting, like, Furgon's secondary apparently has, you know, we can deduce from here. We'll see it plain as day later on, but we can deduce that Furgon Power secondary never lost, which is in line with how I feel about Furgon Power versus Frozen Lances. It just performed way better. Umbra, there's not much difference, and honestly, it kind of makes sense to me. Like, in my head, I've always thought Shade Splitters are better, but in all honesty, I don't know that they are. At least Plink allows you to clear stuff out. And most of the time, a Shade Splitter is just a rubber morsel, and who gives a fuck about a rubber morsel, right? I mean, the only time you want it, it never comes anyway. And then Wormkin is 100-100. Win rate over time is not very useful here. None of these are. I mean, you can glance through them. This is the run that broke my spirit. I don't know why the thing here. Oh, I guess yeah, it's just sorting it by month, so it makes it look like it's on a different day, but it's the same day. It's just lumping it into the month. And this is where I said, unfortunately, I don't have this part color coded, but this is where I said it'd be plain as day, each of them. So really quick, we can just go through, like, so Awoken, Primary, Exiled, that would mean a Wilden Tin run. Never lost one, apparently. That's pretty good. Compared to the Sentient runs, 85%. Hellhorn, actually, yeah, it kind of is in line with what I thought, but it's not a huge difference. So Queen, 85%, Hornbreaker Prince, 87%. Not a huge difference, but Prince actually did better. Pretty wild. God, can you believe that? So out of all the champs, Little Fade is tied for worst with Penumbra. Yikes. I mean, I will say this, I don't think Little Fade particularly is good at 200 shards. I think the Endless variant is good, but I just never really got offered Endless that much. And if I did, I probably skipped it when I shouldn't have. Because Firelight's hella risky at 200 shards early. And same with the Little Icarus. They're just both really risky. And by the way, my little... I should say my Little Icarus runs will be counted in this. It's just that when I go to the actual champ section, it won't list Icarus out. I don't know if that made any sense, but yeah, we see a lot of 100%, though, like 100% win rate with Rector. Rector's pretty powerful. Both Stygian champs 100%. 83% on Primordium, 71% on frickin' Penumbra, bastard. And then Wormkin 100-100. Then for secondaries, yep, pretty much what I thought. The Restore variant by like pretty good margin is the worst secondary other than Frozen Lance. Like they both stand apart from the rest of the secondaries as being shitty. No surprise there. They're both just pretty bad. It's like with Restores, like yes, there are runs where they're good, but most runs they're not good. Most runs they're literally useless from start to finish. Even a Lance at least does some damage early, but a Restore early, if your starting deck sucks, if your champ sucks, good luck. And, but yeah, so there's about a, what is that, 66% to 83%, almost a 20% difference. And Hellhorn, Exiled secondary, this doesn't surprise me. I've always liked Queen's Imps as a secondary. I've never been on board with the hate that they get. I think they're one of the best secondaries in the game. Torches were lower at 83%. Melting Remnant, somehow Dregs. I would put Dregs, honestly, on the level of Lance and Restores, but for some damn reason, I never lost on the 200 shard run. I will never say that they're good or anything other than bad, though. Then Forgotten Power's 100. Plinks are 87. Well, Shade Splitter secondary is 100%. It's actually, you know, somewhat of a significant gap there. Then Wormkin's 100. Now we get to the banner units. We could sort it however. Let's just look at overall wins first. So Railbeater coming in as the most winning unit, if we just look at total wins. No real surprise there. I mean, this card is just so takeable, this unit. I think we saw it represented at every single role that it can be. You know, its best role is as the actual damage carry, but it also can just be a tank, and it can even just be not even really a tank or a damage dealer, but like a unit in the middle of everything that just sort of fluffs, the fluffer, shall we say. Just a god tier unit. Did have a loss with it, but shit happens. Keeper of Echoes, 8-0. That's pretty good. I did say Keeper, you know, it is interesting how, as I've gotten better with Wyrmkin, and they've apparently become my best clan in the game, always fun to look at this data, because I would have never thought that, just in my head, how things went. I knew Wyrmkin went well, but I didn't know it went this well. But it is interesting, because like a lot of the other Wyrmkin units that I used to target, I've not really targeted anymore. Like the eggs, I still think that the eggs are workable, but to me it's just way more free to use Keeper if it's offered. Like, it's very hard to lose with Keeper when it's just like, you put 3 to 4 of them on a floor. You can always put 3 on a floor for sure. You know, 1 pip upgrade if you don't find anything to help your pip, if you don't find anything to overstack. At the bare minimum, you can just take 1 pip upgrade and put 3 onto a floor. And even at that point, ideally I want 4, but 3 is perfectly fine. You're getting so many stats to all of them. And they're a unit that doesn't even really need an infusion to shine, which, you know, on a 200 shard run isn't necessarily that impactful, but they're just a solid unit. I mean, the data doesn't lie. It's 8-0 here. Clearly it's good. Titan Sentry, really, really good unit. I could never bash it, though I will say this isn't the run that broke the camel's back was the Titan Sentry double self-infused endless Titan Sentry. Turns out it isn't necessarily always going to win you a run, because it didn't win me the run. Turns out if you run into Pyre Wings, you're just kind of fucked. Goddamn Pyre Wings. But yeah, I don't know. I'm never going to bash it. It's obviously very powerful. It's probably, of the Stygian units, it's by far the most represented here, right? Definitely outdoing the Sirens and whatnot. But, you know, it's not the free win that it is, right? I think I had a Cuddlebeard on that run, too. I can't remember. Maybe I've blocked much of that run out. Animus Will, no surprise there. It's maybe gone... It's maybe past the sweepers for me, personally. What it lacks in wave clear, it doesn't lack that much. But it more than makes up for in its ability to kill bosses. Like, the sweepers are always in danger of not finding some form of multi-strike in order to kill bosses, because, you know, you can get a single striking sweeper that will clear waves like no other, but, you know, maybe you get trample or something on it too, and it'll wreck waves. But, you know, come time to beat a boss, if it's a tough boss like Diligent, especially in 200 shards, as we saw in one of these runs, it's like, you just can't do it. I mean, I had like a ton of health and damage, but the fact that it was just a single striker, I lost that run to Diligent. Whereas with Animus Will, you're not going to lose Relentless. You're just not going to. It's also just very easy to self-infuse it and get that extra strike. Deranged Brute, I apparently found 6 times. That's wild. I swear to you, even in my normal data, my non-200 shard data, this goddamn unit shows up more than anything. You know, we joked about Glareminder, but maybe I'm just the luckiest motherfucker in the world with Deranged Brute. I mean, I will say this, I always take it if I see it. So, obviously on that note, it will be represented high, but I mean, it's taken here more than Paraffin Enforcer for these 200 shard runs. That's pretty wild. I mean, to have I don't know how many total runs we had. We can tell up here. Oh, apparently we can't. I must have removed that damn thing. Well, whatever. However many runs to find 6 is pretty wild. Even the 4 Glareminders is pretty wild. But yeah, Deranged Brute is obviously insane. This unit probably should be nerfed. Paraffin Enforcer, same story. It's much like the Keeper of Echoes. It's like I feel like as I got better with Melting, as I got better with Wormkin, these are units I just started really trying to build around if I saw them at all. Steelworker, another just really solid unit. Awoken Hollow, 3, but 3 and 2. Eh. It's not really good enough at 200 shards, typically, I would say. The whole self-infused Awoken Hollow thing is just enough to get it done at 100 shards, but even then, those runs are really, really narrow. And at 200 shards, you need some extra help for certain to get there. Morsel Maid, I got 3 and 0. It's weird. Maybe I just blocked these runs out of my mind, but I don't even remember using Morsel Maid on this series. I must have clearly, but 3 and 0. I'm not even going to say no surprise there, because honestly, I have had horrible experiences with the Morsel Maid. Like, prior to this 200 shard run, both my longest, normal win streaks ended with my hubris of having a Morsel Maid in my deck. The worst one, I think the one I lost my 80 streak to, I had a Morsel Maid and an Apex Imp, and I fucking lost. So it's on video. If you want to see me in all my unglory, you can probably go back and find it. Nameless Siren, 3 and 2. Interesting. I mean, I actually thought, like in my head, I thought it performed pretty well. Tough to know for sure. I mean, there's probably a lot of other stuff going on in these runs, but yeah, we kind of keep getting lower here. You know, it's funny though. Thorn Hollow, 3 and 1. It kind of did work at 200 shards. I mean, it's a unit that's been regrowing on me. It certainly is at its best with the Shadow Eater Infusion or the Wormkin, double your buff type thing. And it's a unit that really does plow pretty good early game. So you can take it speculatively and just have it help you get through the early game. And then you'll know later on. I'd have to imagine, unfortunately, this data doesn't track if you had the unit and removed it. But I'd have to remove, I have to imagine there was a lot of runs where I was taking Thorned Hollow and removing it just because it didn't work out. That would be data I wish that I could have, but for what it's worth, I still finished 3 wins and 1 loss with it and 200 shards, so it's not bad. Alloy 2 and 0. House Kermit 2 and 3. That's rough. I mean, I think it's a great unit, but for whatever reason, Woken just had a rough go on this 200 shard series. Awoken, I mean, it doesn't necessarily surprise me. I mean, with Awoken, the Awoken clan is not going to get it done for you. Razor Sharp Edge is your highest offensive scaling card in a general sense, and it is barely enough to get it done at 200 shards. If you don't find Razor Sharp Edge, you're fucked. You better hope to your ass that the secondary clan has it, or that you can do something weird to scale, like a Thorned Hollow or something. Because you ain't gonna get it otherwise with Awoken, because their cards suck. But yeah, everything else here you can read it, and I'm not gonna comment on every unit. Let's do the same exercise with the non-banner units. So Deadweight, man. So now we can actually, here's where we can see it. By the way, nice. So total number of 200 shards that I did was 77. So 69 and 8 is what I went. That's actually a pretty good win rate, I think. for 200 shards. It definitely, that's not like that out of line with my normal win rate. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it's even a little higher. Like, I doubt it's higher. I mean, I went on like a 60-something, or not, so I did go on a 69 win streak and an 80-something win streak. So I'd have to imagine that my normal is higher, but I'm not going to reload the whole thing and look at it. Either way, I think I've proved in this series that 200 shard is more winnable than it is losable. It definitely, there's some runs that are just gonna be unwinnable, but I don't even know if that's true. I mean, I was close to being able to beat the ones that I lost, I feel, other than the ones that just blew out early. The ones that blew out early were usually just some dumb mistakes. But Ritual, though. Ritual, well, it's tied with 3 of them here. Ritual, Tiresome Climb, and Unnamed Tome all have 14 wins. I guess Ritual technically has 3 losses, though, which would probably bump it below these 2. But Tiresome Climb, I'm not surprised to see any of these 3 up here. I mean, Ritual is just such a solid card. Like, it gives you so much damage. Especially with 200 shards, you can willy-nilly take the -2 and not even think about it. You can just be like, oh yeah, -2. Easiest choice of my life, put that on the Ritual. Same with Tiresome Climb. You can put that shit right on Tiresome Climb, no problem. And Tiresome Climb has always been just a god tier card since the DLC dropped. Unnamed Tome, no surprise here, that's Rising Dusk's #1 card. I can't disagree. It performed 14-0 at 200 shards, so you tell me if it's a good card or not. Echo Break, 13-0. Very interesting. No real surprise there, though. I mean, it's a busted card. It's a Cycle of Life for 0. It's wild. Perils, 13-0. That's also not surprising to me. Basically, if I could make Perils work in a 200 shard run, that's absolutely something I'd be looking to do. You could also, in a 200 shard run, you can YOLO that spell chain a bit more justifiably, right? Even if you don't have a holdover secured yet or ever, you can still just YOLO that spell chain, and then you're basically gonna have spell chain on your perils more often than not. Because you're able to justify doing it before you find a holdover. Queen's Imp, 12-1. I think what's going on there is on some of the Shardtail Queen runs that I lost, because I know I lost more than one of them. I must have just removed all the Queen Simplings from the deck. In fact, I know that's probably what's going on, because keep in mind, like I said, Shardtail Queen did not show up in this series, and I wouldn't really have any reason to even have the Imps in my deck if she's not doing anything, right? And Echo Transfer, 11-0. I've always kind of hated on the card. I still have the same thoughts about it. I do think it's overrated, but it's obviously performing quite well. 11-0. Hard to deny that. It's definitely a lot better scaling than like a Razor Sharp Edge. I just think that obviously we didn't see it here because it didn't lose any runs. I just feel like it's really made early game rough when I start with it. But you know what? It's probably better than I'm giving it credit for. I'm coming around on Echo Transfer. I take a while. I'm stubborn. I'm bullheaded. But you know what? It's probably a pretty good card. Making of a Morsel. That's the Morsel Miner card. 11-3. I mean, I can keep going on down. Ensnare, great. Crystallis, I wouldn't say it's great, but I'm 10-0 with it, so I guess. Hidden Passage, good. Plink, yeah. Razor Sharp Edge, like I said, it's not as insane at 200 as it is at 100, but it's probably just all the more necessary. Root Seeds 10 and 1, Restore 10 and 4. Keep in mind these stats, like I said, if there's runs where I end up removing the starters out, then that will skew it. Space Prism, Transcendent, of course. Void Binding. I'm surprised I even had that many Void Bindings. Like, in the top of my head, I didn't feel like I found Void Binding that much, but I did find it 10 and 0 for what it's worth. Woken's Rail Spike. Echoes. Crushing Demise. Crushing Demise is obviously amazing. Offering Token, I feel, did quite a lot of work. Fledgling Imp, it's interesting, like, in my normal data, Fledgling Imp outdoes Ritual of Battle, but just the way it worked out on this 200 shard series, I ended up having Ritual make more sense for most of my decks. But obviously the ones where Fledgling Imp did make sense, I went 9 and 0, so it's still obviously a really good card. Last Stand 9 and 0, I think Last Stand is one of the best rare spells in the game, if not the best. Drip Fall 8 and 0, Ancient Synergy is nice, Ancient Resonance is also nice. Furnace Tap, I don't know why the data does this with Furnace Tap. I've always noticed that. For some reason it says Umbra and NA, but whatever. 8 Furnace Taps is pretty good. Prismal Dust, yeah, Prismal Dust is good. Crystal Extension, I will say, maybe better at 200 shards, because again, I can YOLO a -2 on it without much hesitation. Glimmer is a card I've been a little down on lately. I don't know. I think that it actually suffers from similar problems than that the Entumbra Assault does, in that if I do add 10 and Pierce to it, and a +10, it doesn't actually kill a lot of stuff in the game still. But at least it heals your stuff. It's definitely a great one to put +30 on. If you don't find +30, I don't think it's that great. And so on and so forth. Stat cards with upgrades. We can briefly look at this. Root Seeds, Emberstone. It's just like, I don't know. Is much of this that useful? I don't know. Stackstone, Emberstone, Keepstone, and Twinstone. That's interesting to see that. So Keepstone is Holdover, Twinstone is the spell chain. 6 of them were actually spell chained. 6 of the 11 or however many it was. Queen's Imp. Upon Queen's Imp, only in a 200 shard are you going to see this. I would never do this in the non-200 shards. Usually if I was doing this, it was because it was just better than doing a Train Steward Infusion. It also kind of, if you do this Infusion and you see Transcendent in the future, it would be a way to power it up a little bit, potentially. Ritual with double Emberstones, Tale as Old as Time. Train Steward on a Train Steward, 5 and 1. That was, I'm actually surprised. Well, I'm not that surprised, actually. Usually if I did this, I would eventually remove the unit, so I'm not that surprised that it only shows up 6 times in the end screen. But yeah, so on and so forth. There's just not a lot of sample size here when I make an already small sample size of data even smaller by making it more unique, or increasing the cardinality, I guess is what they would say. Stats per Infusion combo is interesting. I guess we already kind of saw that there, but apparently Queen's Imp onto Queen's Imp was my number 1. 6 and 0. Let's see, a solo Renekton only score right there. The Hot Shark, as the crew likes to call it. Titan Sentry onto Titan Sentry was 6 and 1. Train Steward, we saw that one. Fledgling Imp onto Fledgling Imp was 4 and 0. Rail Beater with the Horn Warrior, I'm always a big fan of this. It's, you know, for basically 10 health, you get multi-strike. That's a pretty good price to pay. 4 and 0. Transcendent with the Queen's Imp. The only reaction, like, I'm surprised we weren't able to pull that off more, because this is one I would absolutely be looking to do on any 200 shard run. I think just the way it shook out, I wasn't able to really make it come together, but still 4-0 with it. Railbeater with the Steelworker, I wouldn't think that is a particularly synergistic thing. I think this is more an artifact of Steelworker, just fits onto anything, and a Railbeater is the unit I took the most. I don't think there's anything particularly synergistic about the two, though. Alloy onto alloy. Of course, if I take an alloy and I keep an alloy, I'm definitely going to self-infuse the alloy. Apparently I did Animus of Will with a nameless siren twice. Tell me. So you're telling me that Animus of Will self-infuse? Starting to question some of this data. There's no way that self-infused Animus of Will is not represented on here. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I do it a lot on my runs, but keep in mind I'm also mixing in, like, I'm omitting any of the non-200 shard runs that I did, so I'm probably remembering other runs, because I know on certainly a lot of the curse seeds that I do, which would not be included in this dataset. Certainly on those I'm always self-infusing the Animus. But yeah, I don't know. This is questionable, but could be that I just on this 200 shard series didn't self-infuse Animus that much. I mean, I think it's actually legit as I do the math here, because wasn't it what 6-0 was the Animus of Will? Yeah, 6-0. So 2 of them were. Where is it? 2 of them were Nameless Siren, and then 4 here. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I guess on the 200 shard series, you know, it kind of makes sense though as I think about it. Self-infuse is tough to justify a lot in 200 shard runs because you kind of need, hopefully, to Hellvent something that already costs shards, and if you're wasting a Hellvent on a vanilla unit, vanilla as in, you know, it's something that doesn't have an infusion already, you know, you're not adding shards, and that can be a problem, right? So actually, I kind of get it. Shows how often you think in your head of how something went, but then you look at the data and you're like, ah, shit, that was a lot different than I remembered it. Don't use me as a witness on the stand. Train Steward Synthesis #1, because I was always slapping Train Stewards into anything. My general thought became, I don't think I articulated this particularly well, and I think this video will come out after Cranberry's 5th time. I kind of did a collab with Cranberry and Voyix and Dusk for Cranberry's 500th episode. Check that out on Cranberry's channel if you haven't seen it. It's pretty good. I'm assuming it's going to be good. It's at this time of me recording this, it's not out, but should be out hopefully by the time you see this video. Certainly it's out. But back to my original point, I think I didn't articulate why I thought the Train Steward essence ended up being actually pretty worth 25 shards, and because it's not really that it's not really the steward under the steward that shines. Like, that's something that you just kind of bogusly do for 200 shards. Like, those ones obviously suck, but in other cases, when I put a steward onto one of my actual banners, I think that's where it's actually pretty good, and something I might start, you know, if I do continue to play this game, which I do think I'm going to do. I still want to do some more stuff. Like, I feel like at the very least, I want to host another tournament. I don't know if I want to play in one, but I definitely want to host one. God, I can't. ADD mind just can't focus on whatever. Let's just focus on what I'm talking about here. So, Train Steward Synthesis. I think it's actually a pretty good use of 25 shards in the context that it removes a card and just gives a slight buff to your banner unit. It's better than taking a shitty banner unit that you wouldn't have took otherwise and using its essence. So like a great example of this, I would say, would be if you had a Husk Hermit and say you had a Shattered Shell come up as the final banner offering that was your only like thing that you might put into the Husk. I think in that case you'd be better off in either a 200 or 100 shard run. You know, either case, I think you'd be better off just skipping the Shattered Shell for 10 gold and putting a Steward into the Husk, or just not using an Essence. You know, because the thing is, if you add the Shattered Shell and use its Essence, it's not really all that much better than a Trained Steward Infusion, in my opinion. Like, maybe you can get some extra damage out of it, but if it's... You know, I don't think it relevantly is that much depending on your setup, and, you know, for a little bit less attack, you could just have basically gotten a free removal. That's, I think, how more I would have articulated it, but I just didn't, I couldn't find the words. I don't have a way with words. I'm very slow to the tongue, shall we say. But yeah, Steelworker Synthesis, no surprise there. Like I said, it's just incredibly usable. There's no way on a 200 shard run that I was ever going to just straight up skip a Steelworker, because I knew that shit was going in somewhere. You know, speaking of things that are definitely worth the 25 shards, the Steelworker Infusion is always worth the 25 shards. The Queen's Impling, I think, is similar to Trained Steward. I mean, Queen's Imp, it's like, I'm doing the same thing when there's a Queen's Impling, but it just is probably a little more useful for me to slam a unit down and have it blast out 40 damage versus just giving something stats. And so on and so forth. And funny, the Animus of Will, it is represented here as a synthesis quite a lot. You know, an essence, really. The back end calls it synthesis, but on the front end it's called an essence. You know, basically the thing that you get when you fuse the unit. The Animus of Will is just one of the easiest ways to get multi-strikes, so often we were just putting an Animus of Will into other things. In fact, we should be able to see that a lot here. Like, Deranged Brute apparently had an Animus of Will. Probably a lot of one-offs, actually. Is it just a lot of one-offs? Yeah, Nameless Siren. Siren of the Sea. Railbaiter. Yep, just a lot of one-offs. Makes sense. It's like anything can really use it. Anything that wants multi-strike, I suppose. You know, it's not like the Horn Warrior one, which I guess we still used 4 times. I mean, it still actually shows it's pretty usable, right? But it's much more specific than the Animus of Will one. Surprised I even used the Morsel Master one. I started to really not value this one that much. I could argue a Trained Steward is almost better than the Morsel Master one. It's just so slow. Like, yeah, in the longer fights it does end up being a decent amount of stats, but by the time you get those stats, the fight might have already been decided. What else we got here? Stats per artifact, definitely worth looking at. Herzl's Compound, you can bet your ass that that's the draw upgrade, the boss upgrade. Wormtooth is just the default worm thing. Shard of Divinity is the, you know, 100 armor or whatever that you get. You know, the counterpart to Blank Pages. We saw it 2 more times than it, but yeah, on a 200 shard run, damn, I lost a Blank Pages run. That's sad. I don't even remember which one that was. I didn't lose any Shard of Divinities for what it's worth. Fell's Remorse. That's the Ember upgrade. By the way, look at this shit. Look at how... This is, of all the times I've looked at my data at various points in the game, this is probably the most pronounced difference I've seen between the boss upgrades. I took the draw upgrade 68 in 68 runs compared to the Ember or Pip upgrade. Light of Seraph is the Pip one. 17 and 19 times each compared to 68. That just goes to show you, I guess. Yeah, Chain of Gems, pretty nice. Improved Firebox. I don't know that it's nice, it's just something I'll usually take if I see it. The perceived upside is there. I mean, it technically performed well, but how well does any one artifact affect a particular run? Who knows, right? It might have just been along for the ride in all 13 of those games. But it just shows the ones I do tend to take more, right? You know, Chain of Gems. Everything above here is kind of, you know, whatever. It's either the 150 shard thing or the boss thing. Chain of Gems is the first actual artifact. So Firebox, Forever Flame, Hell's Banner. Is very interesting that all three of these are Ember related, right? Just shows that Ember is, it's important, which is weird that the boss Ember upgrade isn't represented more, but I think the reason this isn't represented more is because of things like this, right? Because of things like Forever Flame and Hell's Banners. There's actually quite a lot of ways in the game to kind of gain Ember, but there aren't necessarily that many ways to gain Draw. Vapor Funnel, 10 and 0. Bog Slime, Boon of the Blacksmith. I mean, Boon is just, I feel, a safety wall that I probably reached for a little more than I needed to, but for what it's worth, I never lost with it. Nothing too crazy here. Is there anything I just particularly lost with? Cursed Vines, Emblem of the Exiles. Light's Gift. I will say Light's Gift has significantly gone down in my view. I thought about putting it in my most overrated video, but in theory it should still be pretty good, but it's in practice actually pretty bad in a lot of situations. I mean, just think, it's even into Patient, it's just kind of bad. It's like guaranteeing that you're gonna have Seraph the Patient be what hits you if you can't daze Seraph the Patient at least. Sinner's Salve, I stand by it, it's horrible. 5 and 2, look at that. Never mind that Split Anvil went 2 and 2, we'll just ignore that little tidbit of information. How the hell did Split Anvil do so bad, and how the hell did I take it so little? 2 and 2, what the fuck? Poor Split Anvil. Totem Fragment, no way. 4 and 2. Some of these are just sad. I mean, there's no way Totem Fragment is bad. It's a great artifact, but for whatever reason, it just didn't do too good. Those are actually the only ones that I lost 2 or more times with, though. And yeah, I'm never going to say that Cursed Vines is bad. It's just, I don't know, for whatever reason they didn't do well. Champions. I don't like this one that much, but we'll just look here a little bit and see which particular paths seem to win the most. Corruptor. No surprise there. I will always take Corruptor if I see it. I do think it's better than Decayer. Brawler 2 Wrathful. I do think this is the best variant of Hornbreaker. I think it's better than Brawler 3. It's the only one that gives you some passive scaling, and 3 strikes is usually with Hellhorn all you're going to need from him. I mean, you're certainly going to be able to find something else that provides another strike in a Hellhorn run. I have to imagine you will. Wrathful 3, now this could be misleading. There's no way this is good, it's just what I got stuck with. Because I would always start Wrathful, right? I want Hornbreaker Prince to do well early. I want to leak as little Pyre health as possible. So I'm always starting Wrathful if I see it, but if I start Wrathful and I never see Brawler, there's no way I would ever flex Reaper in, right? So that's just by default. gonna leave you with Wrathful 3 if that's what it gave you on that run. And then so on and so forth. This, by the way, is the portion of data where it will not show the little Icarus runs because the JSON's all messed up. Okay, never mind. It did show one. I'm just a dirty liar, I guess. Oh, you know what this is? I actually don't know what this is. Like, I don't know how this... Because it should show Little Icarus 3 here. I don't know what's going on there. That's kind of weird. But this is the one I like to look at more. It's where I blend the paths, because it's really hard to get much sample size when you're going the specific number on each path. So here we just see, was the path used at all? So Wrathful, you know, to compare it up here, it's like it would basically count either of these as Wrathful. It just says, is Wrathful involved at all? So Wrathful is involved in 6 of those wins for Hornbreaker Prince, which I think would be all of them. I think I only went through 6 to 5 times with each champ, because yeah, it would have been 6 with the first 4 champs, and then I ended on Penumbra. So that's why you see Rector at 5. Although then again, you see Shardtail as... Oh, I guess it depends on if you lost with them too, because I remember if I lost, I would not move forward, right? So if I lost to Shardtail, I would move forward, or I wouldn't move forward, and I'd play her again until I won. So Imperialist, you know what? I'm just like talking out of my ass, because it had to have been more than 6 per champ. This is just like the actual champ. You gotta forgive me, I'm tired as hell right now. Dark Calling, this is regroup and rally. So Dark Calling is great. What more can I say? Imperialist is great. What can I say? Cold Channel. Whoa, look at that. Now I will say this. I must be never lucky, because there's no way I ever take a Cold Channel over a Titan Channel. So I basically 1 out of 3'd. You know, basically it's a 1/3 chance you don't get the path that you would want to see, which in my case would be Titan Channel. I basically 1 out of 3, the majority of my runs with Soul Garden only was offered Cold Channel or Dire Channel at the start. Just something interesting to note here. Yeah, so on and so forth. Bristling, apparently I don't recall doing that many bristling runs. Apparently I did. Brawler, Repeater, Superfood. It's definitely one we can go down a little bit. Titan Channel, yeah, only 4 with the Titan Channel versus the 5 of the Cold Channel. So we know that they're probably, and granted, there's probably a few runs in there where I flexed the 2, right? And they'll be kind of double counted here. But yeah, so on and so forth. Strangler, Thornlord. Yeah, I'll just go down this whole list, right? Burn Bright, Cultivating. This isn't probably that interesting. The win rate over time, bar graph. There might be like particular combos that showed up more than others. That's pretty wild that Hellhorn and Queen, Shardtail Queen and Plinks showed up 3 times. But yeah, there's just not enough runs for there to be much repeat offenders here. We can also see, we can actually just track every loss here. So the Sentient and Frozen Lance secondary, I rolled twice. That's rough. One of them was a loss, one of them was a win. Shardtail Queen with Awoken Restores. That's not one that I would think is weak, but I think I remember that loss. I think that was the one that was just a brutal loss to Diligent, where we never found multi-strike, and it actually was borderline unwinnable without it. This one was Prince and Root Seeds. It's another one that seems pretty strong to me as a combo, but for whatever reason we lost one of them. And then we got the various little fade runs here, one of them with torches and one of them with plinks. Actually, I was wrong here. The first one here was Sentient and... No, right. God, I am actually losing my mind right now. Yeah, that was Frozen Lance. But yes, so Plink and Little Fade lost one and won one. The Little Fade and Torches lost one. Primordium and Restores won one, lost one. Penumbra and Restores lost one, and Penumbra and Frozen Lances lost one. And that was the one that killed my spirit and almost made me stop recording Monster Train content for good. But look at me, I'm back on the horse. This bastardly run right here broke my spirit. But what do we do when we fall down, we get back up? Where do my runs end? At least there was not any particular group that killed me. Well, this is wild. Look at this. I only one of my 8 or so losses here was to Divinity. I would not have expected that. I mean, I would have definitely expected like rings 4 and 5 to account for quite a lot, but I also would have, you know, figured that I lost more to Divinity, but for what it's worth, I didn't. And actually, the only time I lost to Seraph was that one run against the Diligent, which equally kind of killed my spirit. But the Pirewings, that was the one that ended my frickin' streak. That one was the worst. I hate the Pirewings. And apparently I lost one to Rage Fell, the Harvesters of Death, the Hasters, that's the Ring 4 Haste is equipped, Infiltration, and then 2 Ring 1 losses, which I think were Little Fade each time, to Heaven's Priests, which is actually the easiest fucking thing in the game. God, I don't know how I lost to that. Heaven's Priest is just the axe dudes with a healer behind, and then First Defense, that one's hard. I mean, that one doesn't surprise me. First Defense is the hardest Ring 1 in it, I would say, especially when you're taking 15 shards of Divine Horde. That's the one where it's just a bunch of tanks with crossbow dudes behind. So apparently I lost 2 of them. Those are the losses. Where do I get pwned the most at? This tracks like my overall pyre health lost and stuff. I don't care too much about averages. I care probably more about a median. So for what it's worth, I lose the most health both on average and both on median to the Clipped Infiltration, the Ring 4 Hasters. Penitent Prayers, that's the Ring 2 Hasters. I never lost a fight to them. Interesting that actually, you know, it's also interesting to look at here is that Ring 2 and Ring 3 I never lost on. I would have thought Ring 2 would have met a death, especially if I had to take like early shards there, but for what it's worth, I didn't appear to lose any Ring 2 or 3s. Yeah, Penitent Prayers, Penitent. I mean, you just see that any of these things that either fuck with your draw order or fuck with your ability to set up fast enough, you could argue they're one and of the same. All 3 of them account for just the most pyre health lost, because I'm just gonna take leaks here and there. But overall, I actually don't lose that much health as a median, right? So I'm basically usually not losing health is the way I interpret that as I go through. But obviously sometimes they'll just murder you with the max health lost. On Diligent I went from 111 to 0. Divinity 96 to 0. I mean, I guess Shade Wings I didn't lose to, but I lost 90 health. That means I probably leaked one or two Shade Wings. Harvesters of Death. I mean, I did lose one to them. That could have just been that. Minimum health lost that actually tracks when I heal. So on some of these, it's wild. Like, I apparently, against the Divinity, healed for 70 health on one of these fights. Wonder what my most was. It was that one. It's just 70. A lot of healing I did, apparently. And that's it. That's about all the data to go off of. And I did say I kind of want to do just some final thoughts on the 200 shard meta, or whatever you want to call it. I think, like I said, it exposes some champs. I can kind of force any champ to really work at 100 shards, but at 200 shards, I'm not going to be able to force some of these shittier champs to work. The first 4 champs, really, right? The Hornbreaker Prince, Sentient, Tethys, and Penumbra. Penumbra, particularly if you don't get Architect, I think Gorge particularly can't do much at 200 shards unless you really high roll on it. Like, I felt like pretty okay about Gorge on 100 shard runs, but I didn't feel very good about it at 200 shards. Granted, I feel like I just was never finding Shroud Spike or anything like that, but I don't know. It comes in at 20 health. That's really, really rough at 200 shards. Keep in mind, like, the most likely slot to put a Gorge Penumbra in at, if you actually are going to use it, is probably mid-floor if you're not finding Wing Technology. Mid or bottom is going to be very hard to survive off 20 initial health. It's kind of ridiculous that Gorge doesn't get more health. And I don't think I like Monstrous at all. I think Monstrous doesn't really do anything. You think about the Divinity fight, 50% of the time you just get hard stopped by the damage shield wave for wave 1, so you're not doing anything wave 1. And by wave 2, you're either dead or almost dead. You don't get much health with even a full Monstrous. And honestly, whether you die or not, I don't even think you kill a tank with the damage that Monstrous has. And then, if you didn't die then, you're definitely dead on the next wave, and you're just feeding the third Harvester wave armor. So to me, I'd still just take Gorge and let it immediately die. That's more useful to me than that. And I don't have to take a pip upgrade for the Gorge Penumbra. But I mean, if those are your two choices, talk about choosing between a pile of puke or a pile of shit. Like, pick your poison, right? Horrible fucking champ. But Architect's good, at least, if you get offered it. I think Spine Chief really solidified for me, though, that it is the best champ in the game. It just doesn't run into the risks that like Little Fade does. Because think about if you're not offered Endless Little Fade. If you're offered Firelight and Little Icarus, there's always a risk there. If you don't, both of those paths really want, especially at 200 shards, to have support in the opening deck for them. The music change fucked with my thought process. So one second. Alright, sorry. I had to put the music back to the initial part. I like that song, it's too intense for me to try to talk over. Come on, brain. Finish it. Finish it. Where are we at here? Come on, brain. I know you're in there somewhere. So, what were we talking about? This song is like really intense too, what the fuck? I thought I went to a chill one. Well, It's distracting, is what it is. It's goddamn distracting. I mean, I like the music. It's just I'm trying to concentrate here. I don't even know what we're talking about. I think I am just dementia. Alzheimer's, early onset. Alright, now this is better. This is some better music. Now I can focus. Can I, though? Like, I literally... Where am I? Where am I right now? Right, champs. Spine Chief. Spine Chief versus Firelight. So, well, Little Fade. So, back to the example of Little Icarus and Firelight. If you choose Firelight, but you don't have any additional reform or burnout extension, you know, we're assuming no reload here, right? Because most of these runs were no reload. It's just something where draw order can absolutely end your run in Ring 1, as we saw. You know, if you just don't happen to be able to keep your floor alive, you're just going to get ran over. And that can happen on any of the first 3 rings, really. And conversely, if you're Little Icarus and it just doesn't, like if it gives you Heaven's Priests, for example, or even worse, I forget the name of them, but the dudes that gain damage shield on Slay. I mean, imagine facing that with Little Icarus as your first ring. How the fuck are you gonna stack your spikes there? You're not. Unless you have some very specific things that help with it. And if you never get a Mark of Invasion, if you're forced into taking enough shards that the first backliners end up having 5 health, all of these things just completely ruin your day. And you're not going to run into that with a Spine Chief on either path of Corruptor or Decayer. You're just not going to run into that. They're going to win any Ring 1 that can be thrown at you, and they're not going to have a hard time doing it. Like, you could have an entire deck of potatoes, but as long as you're starting with 5 fractures, and whatever the other clan gave you, that is 5 of some, you know, infused basic starter, there's just no way that you're gonna die Ring 1, or any ring, really, I would argue. I mean, I certainly did. I won all my Wormkin runs. Interesting, though, also that Echo never lost. I would have expected Echo to lose, but definitely I don't think Echo is as good as Spine Chief, because Echo just often isn't used in a run. Not often, but it's, we'll say seldom times the Echo just doesn't end up making sense to put on a floor and try to get value out of it. Whereas I'll never say that with Spine Chief. If I'm using Spine Chief, it is the focal point of my run. 100%. Full stop. No exceptions. No exceptions whatsoever. I don't think there's anybody other than Little Fade I can say that on. But then when I compare Little Fade and Spine Chief, my before mentioned problems where you can low roll with Little Fade exist, as we saw them on this series. You know, I just died because I couldn't reform the units at the right time, and then the reform pool gets screwed up, and then you're just done. You're just done. Wilden 10 performed quite well. I think Strangler on 200 shards is very good. It's very hard to beat a Strangler. And then the Stygian Champs, I mean, it's definitely worth noting that Stygian Champs just performed, and going back, I only touched on it, but Cold Channel. You know, I can't remember where, if maybe I just read it on Discord, but Cold Channel has always been getting hated on, right? But it got extra hate, I think, in the 200 shard meta, saying that it's just, there's no way it works, but it worked for me every time. I can't remember off the top of my head if it was a throwaway in some of those runs. I'm sure it was in some of them, but even when it's a throwaway, at least it's killing a wave or two. I can't say that for Penumbra, right? But I remember several of the runs Cold Channel just hard carried the run at 200 shards, so I don't know. I think Cold Channel's still actually pretty good. Hell, maybe it's as good as Titan Channel, I don't know. It's just hard for me to not take Titan Channel because it's the most straightforward path to victory I've ever seen. I mean, shit, maybe Soul Guard should start to be talked about with the likes of Spine Chief and Little Fade. I could see an argument for it. I can definitely see an argument for it. But that's about all I have to say. Because, like I said, my brain has turned to mush at this point. And I need to go let it calcify. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.